Paul George is one of the best players in the NBA today. He can score from everywhere. You ask him to shoot a three-pointer or put the ball on the floor and attack the rim, he can do it, and he's been the leader of the Pacers for quite a while now. He's also one of the best defensive players in the NBA as well. But what if I told you there was a chance that Paul George's home would not be Indiana, and he'd be somewhere else in the NBA? That could have happened if the Los Angeles Clippers drafted him way back in 2010. And before we dive into it, let's look at the Clippers. They're a very good team. They have been for a few seasons now, with Blake Griffin and perhaps the most all-around point guard in the NBA and Chris Paul, who's a great leader, as well as DeAndre Jordan, who always has a presence in terms of defense and rebounding. There's also JJ Redick shooting. The Clippers are very good, but they've never been able to really crack the top of the NBA. And a big reason for that is the small forward position. They tried Jeff Green previously, not the effective two-way player they really need. It's safe to say that Paul George fits that bill beautifully. But there's a chance that Paul George would not actually stay on the Los Angeles Clippers if they drafted him. And you'll see what I mean. But first, let's go back to the 2010 NBA draft. Paul George originally drafted number 10. In this situation, he goes number 8 to the Los Angeles Clippers, and off the bench, he shows signs as an athlete, as well as a defensive player for the Clippers. However, his offensive game has not taken off just yet, as his three-point shot struggles, but it seems that he is a nice, promising player. Besides that, Blake Griffin does not take long to leave his imprint on the league as an athlete. And then Baron Davis is the veteran point guard placeholder, at least for the moment. They also have Eric Gordon, who at that time seemed like he was going to become the next big-time scorer in the NBA. More on the Clippers in a moment. As for the Indiana Pacers, they draft Al-Farouq Aminu at number 10 because at that time he was a similar player to Paul George, an athletic wing who could play defense, but his offensive game was also going to be a project as well. Now, as we know, Aminu does not become the player that Paul George does. They also have scoring professional Danny Granger still putting up double digits, Darren Collison. Indiana's coming along, but they're not there just yet. And as for the conclusion of the 2010-2011 season, we get the Dallas Mavericks and the Miami Heat, and Dirk and the crew capture a championship for themselves. And then it gets really interesting before the 2011-2012 season. You remember the Chris Paul trade, where he would go from the New Orleans Hornets to the Los Angeles Clippers? That trade still happens in this scenario, and in the original move, Chris Paul was traded for Al-Farouq Aminu, Eric Gordon, Chris Kaman, as well as a first-round pick that would turn into Austin Rivers. Now in this scenario, Eric Gordon and Chris Kaman still come over. They are wearing Pelicans jerseys. It's the best I can do, I'm sorry. But Paul George is also traded as well, because he and Aminu at this point were pretty similar players, athletic wings that needed to improve on offense. And looking back, should the Clippers have just traded Eric Bledsoe and kept the wing? Yeah, probably, especially now. But Paul George being drafted by the Clippers results in him being a member of the New Orleans Hornets, as the Clippers still trade for Chris Paul, and they don't realize how good of a player Paul George ends up becoming. And as a result of this, the Clippers' story in this situation, it's pretty much the same as how it happens in real life. There's no major moves to the team. And then if we move on to the New Orleans Hornets, again, they're the Pelicans in the game. I'm sorry, it's all I can do. Paul George takes a jump in the 2011-2012 season as his scoring ticks up and he is effective from all areas of the floor. However, Eric Gordon being out for the majority of the season, only playing in 9 games, makes it pretty tough for the team to score, and overall they still only win 21 games on the year, even if Paul George looks promising. And as for the Indiana Pacers, David West still provides them with mid-range scoring, toughness, and defense. Danny Granger puts up about 19 points per game, but Paul George's quote-unquote replacement, Al-Farouq Aminu, he definitely makes an impact on the defensive side of the floor, but his jumper is straight garbo, and it makes it really tough for the team to have a balanced offense. They win 39 games overall, a few games worse than when they had Paul George in this real-life scenario. They go down in round 2 to the Miami Heat in pretty quick fashion, and then LeBron James and his big three go up against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they capture their first championship, or LeBron's first championship, I should say. Now, in the 2012 draft, we get our first significant change as the Indiana Pacers move up to the 20th overall pick, where they select Evan Fournier to give them some more shooting that they don't get from Al-Farouq Aminu. Originally, they selected Miles Plumlee with the 26th pick. But that's not the big deal. The real one is Anthony Davis goes number 1 overall to the New Orleans Hornets. And if I can show you them once again in Pelicans jerseys, the pairing of Paul George and Anthony Davis is officially underway. And while Davis looks good, Paul George takes a huge jump, averaging nearly 20 points per game, and he is definitely their best player and someone they want to invest in long term. But the team only wins about 32 games because, remember, this is Anthony Davis's rookie season. Let's wait a couple of years. But there's definitely something exciting brewing in New Orleans at the moment with these two. Now, in the Eastern Conference, George Hill is now the point guard of Indiana after the Kawhi Leonard trade. And the team also looks to further address their shooting woes by signing Courtney Lee in free agency. But they definitely feel the effects of Danny Granger being out for the majority of the season, as they are forced to play some wild team basketball. Even then, it can get pretty ugly at times. But the team's toughness, the defense, and the team-first mentality, they still grind out 44 wins in the regular season before losing to Carmelo Anthony and the 2-seeded Knicks in round 1. As for the 2012-2013 NBA Finals, we get the San Antonio Spurs losing to the Miami Heat in a wild 7-game series. Shout out to LeBron. Now it's time for the really weird 2013 draft, which goes through changes, but it doesn't really go through changes. You see, the Pelicans, they moved down in the lottery to number 9 because of their better record. And so as a result, the Sacramento Kings end up with the Pelicans' original 6th overall pick. And I was ready to give Boogie Nerlens Noel as his front court mate. But after doing some Googling, it seems that they were really set in on Ben McLemore, which disappointed me pretty mightily. But now what happens to Nerlens Noel? Well, you will see that the 7th overall pick with the Pistons, they're not going to draft Nerlens. They already have Andre Drummond. And the 8th pick, the T-Wolves, they don't realize that Nikola Pekovic is about to be injured for 9 years, so they don't need him at center. So he still goes to the New Orleans Pelicans. It's just at number 9 instead of 6. So as a result, he still gets traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, which means Drew Holiday is once again the point guard of your New Orleans Pelicans. So it ended up being the exact same thing anyway. Now the Indiana Pacers do select Tony Snell with the now 17th overall pick. Now if we head to the 2013-2014 season, the Pacers signed Kevin Martin in free agency to show signs of what Danny Granger once was for them as a scorer, because they really need to improve on that side of the floor without a player like Paul George, combined with how good the team is defensively. And Indiana is one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, and because of this, Evan Fournier is not getting too many minutes right now, but he will emerge later on for them. As for the Pelicans, is this the year that they really take off? Well, somewhat. Anthony Davis has a very good second season, and Paul George is, without a doubt, one of the top wings and top players in the NBA. But they get hit with the injury bug, one of them being Drew Holiday, who only plays in about 35 games for them. Also, their center is Alexis Ajinka, who's pretty bad. But still, the team wins 45 games overall, which is 11 better than they would have originally done. But they can't crack the Western Conference playoffs just yet. Now, the Pacers do make the playoffs, but as we remember, this Pacers team kind of collapsed towards the end of the season in real life. So as a result, they lose in round 1 to the Chicago Bulls, and they have some more things to address in the offseason. Kevin Love is also pretty mad that he doesn't have a 20-point scorer at his shooting guard position, but I'm sure he'll get over it. The San Antonio Spurs win this NBA Finals over the Miami Heat, and if we can move on to the 2014 draft, the Pelicans do not have their pick. It is with the 76ers, and the Indiana Pacers originally did not have their pick because they would have traded for Luis Scola. But in this situation, they're not title contenders. They don't trade Scola. They end up keeping their draft pick, and they end up with number 18, where they select Rodney Hood. Sorry, Utah Jazz fans. They want some more scoring. They have the defense, but They need some more offense. And they find out pretty quickly what Hood can do because for the 2014-15 season, Kevin Martin is injured for a majority of it. So they finally call upon Evan Fournier to play some significant minutes. And he shows early signs of someone who can be a scorer. And Rodney Hood does the same thing as well coming off the bench. And it seems that these two could be some real long-term options for Indiana, although the team itself doesn't win too much this year. And as for the Pelicans, this is the year they finally take off, right? No, unfortunately, Paul George still gets injured in a horrific way in a Team USA practice. So the team originally won 45 games without Paul George in real life. They do the same thing again here. But people are starting to believe that once Paul George comes back, these guys could really be title contenders with him and Anthony Davis. And again, just like in real life, they do meet Golden State in round 1. And they get swept because Anthony Davis and the crew just don't have enough juice for Steph Curry step-back three-pointers. And then Golden State goes on to win the NBA Finals that season. Now on to the 2015 draft. Without Kevin Martin, the Pacers would win 38 games, funny enough, which is how many they won in real life, even with a different roster. So they still select Miles Turner to help him out at the center position with shooting, and so they have a nice young group growing, but they're definitely a few years away. As for the Pelicans, this is the year. The two-headed monster of Paul George and Anthony Davis is just too much to deal with. When you have two of the best players in the NBA, it's impossible to defend, and they're also damn good defenders themselves. So the Pelicans win 52 games in the West. 52 sound a little low. Well, Eric Gordon plays about 45 games with injury. Omer Asik is Kendrick Perkins levels of bad on the center spot. So they don't have the ideal team around them, but it's enough to where they can still make the Pelicans one of the best teams in the Western Conference. And on to the postseason. Ironically enough, they face the Clippers in round 1. They go through them in 6 games. And then in the second round, they meet, once again, the Golden State Warriors, and they give them all they can handle. Curry and the crew are asked to go up to another gear if they really want to repeat as champions. And for a while, it seems like a neck-and-neck series, because Paul George and Anthony Davis are great. And while the Warriors ultimately do win it in 6 close games, it seems that New Orleans is going to be a thorn in their side for quite a long time. And then Golden State loses to LeBron James in the finals in a really stupid 7-game series. And now for the 2016-2017 season, the Pelicans choose to let Eric Gordon and Ryan Anderson walk in free agency. Combined with the salary cap going up, they signed Dwight Howard to $18 million a season to solidify their center position. Dwight willing to take a little less to be on a winning team. He's willing to do that at this age. Hopefully he stays in line within the locker room. Now that the team actually has a center who can make a difference next to Anthony Davis, everybody else gets better. In round 1, they face the Trailblazers. They go through them no problem. Round 2, Kawhi Leonard and the San Antonio Spurs do not go quietly, but they're just too damn good, man. The athleticism up front, Paul George being a beast. They're going on to the Western Conference Finals, where they get to meet the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant, I might add. Now, who wins this series between these two teams? I got no freaking clue, man. They're both really damn good. At this point, Anthony Davis may grow into the best player in the league because he has another great player next to him. And this would be a hell of a rivalry for the NBA to have. And regardless of who actually wins, we would all win as basketball fans because we'd get to watch it. So in other words, I don't have the guts to actually pick a winner for this thing. But regardless, if Paul George was drafted by the Los Angeles Clippers, Anthony Davis would get the star player next to him that he desperately needs. The Indiana Pacers would go through a process which eventually would lead to them being a promising young team, and Chris Paul would be really mad on the Clippers because, one, they would just be kind of good but not championship contenders, and also Chris Paul is just kind of mad all the time. That's going to do it. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.